Happy 2025, everybody. If all goes to plan, this will be released on New Year's Day. So I hope you all are having a good day. I think most people have it off, so I hope you guys are enjoying your day off. And I just want to try something a little bit different. You know, on Friday, I'm going to be releasing my top 10 books that I read this year. But today, let's talk about movies. I love movies. I watch a lot of them, and I don't really talk about them on this channel. This channel's usually, reserved for my thoughts on music. Usually it's prog or metal, but I wanted to do a top 10 list of my favorite movies from 2024, just to give maybe a little bit more context of the music that I love. There is definitely a Venn diagram of movies and music, and this will, I think, help people kind of understand where I'm coming from when I'm connecting to an album that you're like, they like this record? Why is that? Maybe this will help, kind of give you that context. Also, before I start, I'm holding space for Nosferatu. Unfortunately, the city that I live in is not showing it. I've left in the description if I've seen it or not. It'll probably say, I haven't seen Nosferatu yet, or I've seen Nosferatu and it is number whatever, with a little bit of a context of why it's there. That out of the way, I've got 6 honorable mentions that I wanted to talk about really, really quickly, and they're in alphabetical order. So coming up first is Deadpool and Wolverine. Love this movie. I saw it twice, and I don't really see a lot of movies, multiple times in theaters anymore. I used to do a lot in my younger days, but I just don't have the time. A movie has to be really special for me to watch it twice. I really loved how this movie, you've got the jokey jokes, you've got the interplay between Deadpool and Wolverine, but what really hit me hard was some of the themes in this movie, like studios and executives taking these characters that have a really diehard fan base and screwing them over, and kind of the repercussions of that. And I really love that this movie kind of deals with that, and they kind of do it in a little bit of a jokey joke way, and there's definitely a lot of that member berries in this that I feel like a lot of movies are doing, like, Spider-Man, No Way Home, a lot of the DC movies were trying to do, but I feel like this one did it the best. So yeah, great movie. Another one that I loved was Dune Part 2. I loved the first one, Dune Part 1. I know a lot of people love Dune Part 2 more. I don't know. For me, there was something really special about the first one that wasn't necessarily captured in the second one. I still love the second one. The cinematography, the score, the overall just atmosphere and the vibes. Denis Villeneuve is a master and a visionary. He's one of my favorite directors working right now. And I can't wait to see if/when we get Dune Messiah, because I love the Dune books. Dune Messiah gets real weird. I mean, it gets even weirder once you get further along in the storyline. But yeah, there's some things in Dune Messiah that I don't know if people are ready for. So yeah, Dune Part 2, great stuff. Another one was Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. Again, loved George Miller. I think that's it, George Miller. Love his visionary. Not as good as the, Mad Max Fury Road, but I love what he's doing with the character. Anya Taylor-Joy is just, she's one of the best working right now. And her embodying this very complex and emotionally driven character in a very subdued and subtle way. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Another one that I really liked was Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. This past spring into summer, my partner and I watched all of the Planet of the Apes, starting with, Planet of the Apes, then Rise, and then War, and loved them. Absolutely loved them. This one's not necessarily as good as those ones, but it was still a good time, and I love the story that they were telling within it. Another one that I loved was Right Here, Right Now, the Ghost concert. I was lucky enough to see it in theaters. Again, I had to drive an hour and a half away to see it, but what a great movie. What a great concert. Love that they blended the movie and the concert, because I saw a couple of them. I saw the Taylor Swift's Era Tour, but yeah, there was just something special about this one, because Ghost is one of my favorite bands, wearing their t-shirt. So this was a great one, and I can't wait to finally own it. Trying to find that thing is friggin' hard. And then the final honorable mention is Sonic 3. This almost made my top 10 list, but didn't quite make it there. It just snuck under the radar. But I love, Sonic Adventure 2 is one of my all-time favorite video games. So seeing Shadow on the big screen being voiced beautifully by Keanu Reeves. Loved this story, loved this complex character in this fun, almost action comedy of Sonic. Man, it's just a breath of fresh air. I love what they were doing with this character. That final, when they started playing that song, and Sonic fans will know what I'm talking about, in the big climax, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. The final showdown between Sonic and Shadow is probably the closest that we'll get to like a Dragon Ball Z live action, like a proper one, because the fighting that they're doing, man, it's just ridiculous. And I didn't even touch upon Robotnik. Jim Carrey, being one of my all-time favorite actors, is having the time of his life playing both Robotniks on here. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Okay. That's a lot of lead up for the honorable mentions. Let's get into the actual list proper, with number 10 being Will and Harper. A little bit of a documentary road trip. At the end of the day, this movie really is about friendship. How friendships change, how they evolve, how they morph as we as people morph and change, and coming into our own. You know, the on-screen text of this movie is, you know, Will Ferrell and his very long-time friend Harper, and Harper realizing that she's a trans woman very late in their lives, and how that changes the dynamic, and does that change the dynamic? And I love that it's very much centered on their friendship and their road trip across the US. So heart-wrenching. I cried a bunch of times, and it's such a good film. So if you haven't seen it, you can watch it on Netflix, and I really highly recommend it. Number 9 is The Remarkable Life of Evelyn. Evelyn, I believe is how you pronounce it. Another documentary. Man, coming into this film, people keep saying you're going to cry. And I cry at a drop of the hat. And they were not joking. Holy jeez. Very brief synopsis. It's about a young man who had a degenerative disorder that essentially made him like completely enfeeble, and he eventually dies from it. And he found solace in an online community through World of Warcraft. And what I particularly love is some of the subtext within this film. Even though a lot of it is his parents finding this very rich life that he lived through this video game, and the friends and the connections that he made, like his parents were so worried that he didn't live a proper life, and finding how much of a rich life he had on this online game. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. The final shot of this movie just made me weep. You know, like I thought I was keeping it together. I had a couple sniffles, you know, I had a couple tears on the cracks, but that final shot, man, inconsolable. Just whale noises. You know, I'm glad I didn't see this in theaters because it would have been very embarrassing for me. But I also just love how it shows that video games dismantles a lot of the barriers that disabled people face on a day-to-day basis. You know, like how ableist our day-to-day activities and lives are, and how much online presences within World of Warcraft, but even more modern ones, Roblox, Fortnite, how much the barriers are gone, you know, and those are barriers that we put up. You know, it's not like something that is there through absence. It is there through like active, like it's there through action. So love this movie. It's a remarkable film. If you want to cry, watch this film. Number 8 is Civil War. Yeah, I came into this expecting one thing and I got something very different, and I was so pleasantly surprised about that. Really focusing in on the observer. You know, it's basically about this, another road trip movie, but as press and the importance of press and going through this historical moment within a mythical United States of America. And yeah, it was doing some very, very brave things, but also in a much more readily digestible way. So yeah, absolutely love this one. Go and check this one out if you haven't watched it already. Number 7 comes to us from across the pond. And by across the pond, I mean India. I love Bollywood. I love Tamil theater. You know, my partner and I, once a month, we go on to the streaming services like Netflix and Prime. and we find ourselves a good Bollywood or Tamil film, and we spend like 4 to 5 hours watching them. And, you know, this one was a good time. I was lucky enough to actually see it in a theater, which is so rare. I got to see it in IMAX in 3D, and that is Fighter. It is definitely a Top Gun Maverick ripoff, but the story that they tell is so much richer. I love that Bollywood gives characters the space to tell a good story. You know, it's not over in 90 minutes. We've got 3, 4, sometimes even 5 hours with these characters to go on the emotional journey that we need. And it was also refreshing not to have the propaganda within the US military being shoved down my throat all the time as a Canadian. Within movies like Top Gun Maverick, you know, like anything that uses, you know, the US military, they always have to paint it in a very positive light because, of course, they do. So it was very refreshing to have it from somebody other than the US. Very breath of fresh air. You know, it's talking about being proud of your nation, being able to fight for it. And that's the whole thing of Fighter. It's you are a fighter for your nation. And yeah, loved it. I love the twists and turns within the characters. The action sequences on here are fantastic. I love the musical numbers. I wish more films did those. The dance sequences on there were fantastic. And yeah, loved it. Absolutely loved it. Number 6 comes to us from I Saw the TV Glow. Man, another movie that was heart-wrenching. At the end of this movie, was bawling. Those final shots. I don't want to give anything away, but the final scene of this movie just made me inconsolable. I watched it twice, once with my dad and once with my wife. And my dad was just like, yep, that was a movie. What the hell was that about? And my wife was just like, damn, son, that's some heavy shit. And I'm like, yeah, it's being marketed as a horror. And yeah, I can see that, but like, it's so much deeper than that, you know? Yeah, I love this movie. I cry every single time I watch it. Yeah, great movie. Great movie. Number 5, let's talk a little bit more about some big blockbusters. Twisters. Love this film. I like it more than the original, if you can imagine. My wife and I quote this movie all the time. We keep saying to one another, if you feel it, you know. I love how they also just kind of take some of the aspects of the original Twister movie and kind of flip it on its head. But then once it's flipped on its head, it subverts the expectation of the audience, which I really, really appreciate. You know, so many of these like sequels that come 20 years after the original are either a paint by numbers of the original or it's just a watered down version. And I feel like this movie really expanded on some of the key themes of the original film, while it's still about, you know, chasing twisters and chasing tornadoes and storm chasers. Yeah, great film. I love how it dives into the whole like celebrity aspect of it and how it can be used for good and for bad. I love how it dives a little bit more into like how people respond to tragedies like tornadoes. We're going to be getting a lot more of them because people would rather make more money for shareholders and actually save the freaking planet that we're on. But what do I know, right? And I like that this movie kind of deals a little bit with that. All right, number 4, another popcorn blockbuster that I loved, The Fall Guy. I know a lot of people didn't like this one, and I know it kind of bombed a little bit at the box office, but man, I love a popcorn action romance. You know, like, yeah, you could kind of say that this is a rom-com, but this is more of a action-com, and I feel like more and more movies are doing that. You know, a couple years ago, we got The Lost City with Channing Tatum and Sandra Bullock. And my wife and I love that one. We watch that quite regularly. And I feel like The Fall Guy is doing very, very similar things. We love it. I love just how silly and stupid it is. The stunt work on this is second to none. Some of the action sequences on this movie are some of the best I've seen all year. All right, let's talk about the top 3. Number 3 comes to us from The Wild Robot. I love good animation films. And this one just was so heart-wrenching. One of the things that I particularly love about The Wild Robot is that some of the more emotional linchpin moments in this movie do not come to us at the end. It actually comes to us at the midpoints. And I wish more movies did this. Don Bluth movies from the 80s did this very often. I love the concepts of parenthood. I love the concepts of found family. This movie is just a visionary spectacle as well. Like, I love the animation on this. It's not just your typical paint by numbers DreamWorks or Disney. It has its own style that's very much unique into and of itself. The characters are great. I love the character arcs that we get, not only from the wild robot itself, but the duckling that it raises, the fox that helps raise it, and the community that it builds. And it really does show that we're stronger together. And that's what I absolutely loved about this film. All right, down to the final two. Number 2, gotta be Wicked. It's gotta be Wicked. I'm a millennial, so like this was my jam back in circa era of 2003. This is all that my whole personality at that time was Wicked. I knew the soundtrack in and out. I read the books way too early. I saw the play twice when it was in Toronto. I cried every single time when it came out. And this movie expanded upon it, and it really shows how to adapt a Broadway musical to cinema, and I just feel like when these adaptations are happening, they're happening for a cash grab. There's not a lot of stylistic flair to it. And sure, the visuals might have a stylistic flair. Like I'm thinking of Joel Schumacher's The Phantom of the Opera. But when you're not really adapting and you're just cut and pasting, what works on stage doesn't work on film. And having Hollywood actors take on big roles, like Gerard Butler is no Michael Crawford or Colin Wilkinson, unfortunately, so those big moments are kind of lost. What made The Phantom of the Opera so exciting is the belting out to the back bleachers. It's kind of hard to do when the camera is right in your face. This really shows how to adapt a Broadway show to cinema. And splitting the movie into 2 was brilliant. At first I'm like, is it going to work? How are they going to do it? Will it get lost in the sauce? The movie is longer than the actual play itself, and it's only part 1, but it gives space for these characters. It allows the character development to happen. In theater, on stage, there's a lot more suspension of disbelief. That doesn't necessarily translate all that well to movies, so you got to give the character space. You got to give them that time to grow, to have those more intimate moments, which are usually being belted out to, thousands of participants. So I love that Wicked really knew how to translate it. I cried no less than 3 times on this. I knew that this was going to work because Cynthia and Ariana, I've been following their career for a while. Cynthia, I fell in love with when I saw her in The Bad Times at El Royale. She did a fantastic job on that one. I knew that Ariana could do it when she, got her start on Victorious and some of the more Nickelodeon stuff on there. So I knew she had the comedic timing. Everybody was shocked, being like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that Ariana Grande could do these kinds of things. I'm like, brah, were you even watching Victorious back in the day? She has the comedic chops in order to embody Glinda properly. So I knew that both of them could do it, and it exceeded my expectations. There we go, Wicked. But my number 1 movie of 2024 goes to The Substance. This movie, I friggin' love this movie. Demi Moore is like a goddess. She really shows how her acting chops are like second to none, and man, is she gorgeous. And the fact that, she has to take this substance in order to feel beautiful again. I love the allegories and the themes about this of, your youth destroying your aging, how you're supposed to age, your relationship of looking back of how good you had it, but you couldn't, appreciate it. It's that old saying of youth is wasted on the young, which you need to get out of your lexicon. But not only that, like Margaret Qualley as the younger version, as Sue, just, she embodies so much of what Demi was putting down. And the relationship that Sue and Elizabeth have with one another, you know, I love that you can read their relationship in many different ways and still come out with a proper answer on that. What really did it for me, though, was, you know, the relationship that we, as a society, have with aging stars and what women specifically will do to their bodies in order to be accepted, you know, as people. When I watched this in the theater, because again, I was, you know, lucky enough to see it in the theater, the ending of this film is kind of played up for laughs, and the theater that I was in, everybody was laughing at the big, you know, the climax and the ending of this movie. I was in tears. I was so, like, gut-wrenched crying of the ending of this film that I was just like, they're tapping on something that is so human and what we will do to try to fit into this box of what we're expected for, and how unattainable it is, how they keep moving the goalposts, and how human it is. And it is played up for laughs, and I was just destroyed. Brilliant, brilliant movie. 10 out of 10. Absolute masterpiece. Love this film. Highly, highly recommend this film. Absolutely loved it. It deserves all the praise that it's been getting. Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley doing fantastic, fantastic jobs on here. And I just love the relationship that those two women have. So yeah, The Substance, #1 movie of 2024. Very, very well deserved. The last one that I wanted to talk about was Hundreds of Beavers. Now, Chris Stuckman had this as the #1 movie for him. Spoiler alert. And the only reason why I didn't have that, even though I did watch it in 2024, is that it was technically released in 2022. And if it had been released this year, it would have probably been my second favorite movie. But I wanted to at least mention Hundreds of Beavers. If you haven't seen it already, please, I beg you to see it. One of the best movies I've ever seen. So funny, so innovative, not a whole lot of dialogue, but it tells a very compelling story. So there you go. Those are the movies, my favorite movies of 2024. What were some of the movies that you loved this year? What were your favorites? What were your least favorites? I realized I cannot condense a list like this any shorter, and I just keep rambling, so I'm going to cut it there. What were your favorite movies of 2024? What were your least favorite movies? How does my list compare with yours? Please let me know all about that by commenting down below. Do you want to see more videos like this from me? Do you want to see me talking about movies, talking about books, talking about things other than music? Let me know. I'm always open to try new things. But yeah, I think that's where I'm going to leave it for today. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.